on Jones and Company, and this is an extended edition of the program because we have quite a number of questions to put to the Prime Minister on the economy and other social development issues. And Prime Minister, we were talking about VAT a while ago, and so I want to move on to talk about things that have affected Bahamians in the last year very significantly. There are a whole lot of Bahamians who have lost their homes or banks have foreclosed on them. And your government had proposed a mortgage relief plan. It didn't work out, did it?
No, and we thought we had agreement with the banks, but in retrospect, when we look back, we do understand the position the banks have taken. This is a grave challenge in our country that we have had now meetings with the Royal Bank of Canada, particularly, where I had the head man from Toronto in, and I spoke with him and bared my soul to him about people who have come to me and saying not only they're going to lose their homes, but their children or their mother who was guaranteeing as a guarantor would lose theirs as a result. Then I've had the banks come to me and tell me that they have not put people out of their homes to a great extent, because if they put them out, the homes will be vandalized, and that there are large numbers of people living in homes not paying mortgages, and the bank is just watching this happen, and they're saying they need to be able to work out with the government
what is the
formula.
Answer?
The answer is that in a way similar to what we did with the company Resolve when we took $100 million in debt of the Bank of the Bahamas and professionalized the approach of dealing with the $100 million, where we got Deloitte and Touche and we put a professional board of directors to manage that $100 million, and we feel good about that process. Well, similarly, the banks going to have to take a hit. The banks going to recognize that they need the government's intervention. And we're working out now how that intervention will take place, what will be the carrying cost of the bank, what will be the carrying cost to the government. We believe that in terms of our own discussions with the Royal Bank of Canada, that we are close to a formula that would be agreeable. This is as much a part of the bank's offering as the government wanting to do it, and we believe it will be manifestly in the interest of people who are challenged in terms of that. People who, for example, had lost their jobs during the recession and now have jobs, now could pay, but they have this accumulated amount of money that they simply can't pay. And so these are the areas that we are addressing. And as we move into the new year, I'm hoping that we will be able to come up with a formula, because we have not given up on it. I recently met with Fidelity Bank to discuss it. They gave me some extraordinary sort of statistics to show again the gravity of the problem and how they're trying to deal with an issue where they have to make a decision that even though they can't get paid, to protect the asset, they're going to let people stay in even though they're not paying.
So the after effects of the economy, of the recession, still being felt in the Bahamas?
Oh, there's no question about it, in a very, very, very major way.
Yes.
But therefore, that is why there needs to be a very creative or innovative approach by both the banks and the government to solve this problem. Our problem when we first came to power was we were giving the banks our formula. Now what has happened is we've sat with the Royal Bank in particular, with now Fidelity Bank, and we have been working through the issues with a view to coming up with a solution that will be agreed even if we start just with the Royal Bank of Canada.
So banks are challenged. Banks are apparently losing money. Banks are downsizing. So the banks seem to be challenged even more than consumers.
Well, they are challenged. They are challenged, and it's not just the Bank of the Bahamas, as we've seen,
yes,
that has gone through this challenge. But the fact of the matter is that we are near, okay, a formula that I think will be an agreed formula that the government could use going forward.
For all the clearing banks?
And for the economy, to make the economy better and stronger, to put the banks in a position not to not having lost money, because they're going to have to take a hit on this, just like the government will have, but one that will be, I think, serve the best interest of people who need to stay in their home, And you know, it may well end up in some instances being a rent to own again, where rather than lose your home, you pay rent until such time as you are able to have that crystallized in the form of another mortgage. But the point is, we are near in a resolution to this matter. I expect to be able to address this early in the new year moving forward, and I feel very good about what we're doing now.
Where are we with BAMSI? BAMSI is a very interesting project. I visited it, and I see, however, that the roads are still not passable in some cases.
You haven't been there recently.
Okay, fine. So the roads are
when
being
you
repaired?
when you land, the contract has been issued. A $7.5 million contract
Yes.
has been issued. The road, you can drive now along the roads. It's
Very
been
good.
smooth.
Very good.
So there's no question about that. The roads were in terrible shape. You know, BAMSI is a very interesting experiment, one that, I called it an experiment when I started, but it's an interesting economic intervention for this reason, that Andros is about 2,300 square miles. About 43% of the land mass of the Bahamas is Andros. It has the third largest barrier reef. It has ecosystems marveled by the world. 80% of the revenue on 10,000 people live on the island is about as large or larger than Trinidad. So here's this island, right, that's just being there. I went down there and I said, I'm going to spend $100 million in this term on infrastructural improvements in this island because it doesn't make sense to have it sitting there so rich and diverse in its offering to the world. I mean, people come in and write textbooks. The University of Miami write textbooks on flat fishing. It's the best flat fishing or fly fishing in the entire world in Andros. Someone have said it's $100 million, $200, $300 million industry not properly exploited. Whatever it is, we decided that we would go and put BAMSI there. We decided that BAMSI would have a commercial arm both on the marine side and fishery and on the agricultural side. We decided in Andros, where 30% is from fly fishing, 70% is from agriculture, sponging, crabbing, okay? 1% from agriculture, the economy down there. And so we decided we're going to change that. 138,000 arable acres of land in North Andros. Pending once made a speech that as the lands become urban in Florida, Andros will loom in importance in terms of the pine forest producing turpentine and producing wonderful crops for export. Well, we've decided to take Pinling's vision and actualize it. And that's what's happening down there. We've decided that we're going to work with Andros farmers and farmers around the Bahamas. We'll license them. We'll bring all the technology, bring all the best farming in, and we're going to grow things, Mr. Jones, we're going to grow all the things that this country is consuming. And Andros, over the next 2-3 years, will loom in its importance in putting food on the shelves of Bahamians. Whether it's papaya, whether it's limes, whether it's food, vegetables, we are going to do it. And
Again,
so
is the
it's
cost being passed on?
Well,
I'm told that there are some things being produced in Andros, but you do not see the benefit to the consumer.
no, see, I think it's the initial stages.
Yes.
And BAMSI being what it is also a research institute. And all of the things you're talking about, all of the concerns will be addressed. How to produce goods that are healthy, organic, how to produce goods that are needed. I mean, the Lucayan Indians used to grow cassava, and we still import cassava, for God's sake, because we never had a waxing machine or polishing machine. We still import bananas, we still import. So the point is, we have a plan. And the plan is intended to be able to impact this whole idea of diversification and cut into $1 billion worth of foodstuffs that we import every year. So BAMSI is well on its way. We expect BAMSI to impact Eleuthera, Exuma, Abaco, Freeport, Grand Bahama.
Okay. Social development, Prime Minister, there are a good number of Bahamians who are very anxious again, fearful about the level of crime in our country. Your government is clearly not doing well in terms of dealing with the challenge of crime fighting, is it?
Well, You know, the answer is that we're not dealing well, so to speak, with the murders that are taking place, the killings. You know, the statistics would show improvements in other areas, but what has happened is Bahamians justifiably, on the amount of killings, have this fear. And it's a fear that is real and tangible, and one that should motivate us not to compromise on our efforts to introduce innovations and strategies to deal with this. I can tell you that we are working assiduously to bring about the control of what is happening here. And we're taking a major approach to it. For example, lots of the killings have taken place by people who've been out on bail. And the tragedy is that they become victims either through killing or being killed.
So the criminal justice system is
The criminal
broken?
justice system has been, if not broken, has been challenged severely. But the point is this, the Attorney General, the Minister of National Security, have put in place plans that has resulted in our passing legislation to deal with gangs severely. You know, we've worked on the basis that justice must be swift, justice must be certain, justice must be severe. In terms of that, punishment must be severe. And so we've worked on that basis. But we've introducing 10 courts that will try people concurrently. In this new year, we're signing new judges, employing new judges, etc. We've employed over 200 new police officers. We have more in training now.
But that tells you you're failing, Prime
No,
Minister.
no, it doesn't. No.
If you have to construct new courts, 10, if you have to appoint new judges, if you need new policemen, it shows you that there's an escalation of crime, and the country is really not dealing.
It shows us that there has been an escalation of crime, and that the only way you're able to deal with it, if you do the math, is to be able to recognize that the judges of the courts have said that if you cannot be tried within a period of 3 years, then you are in constitutional contravention. In other words, in contravention of the Constitution, and the person should be admitted to bail. And therefore, the only way you're able to do that is to be able to, one, give the courts greater access to jurors. So we've amended the law to allow them to be able to bring jurors even from the islands. Two, right, that they have enough courts going at the same time. So we therefore made new courts. This is now about to open, new judges to be employed, so that therefore concurrently we'll be trying these things. All of this is a sign of the times that exist.
Yeah, but during all of this, you are still manufacturing criminals. They are coming off an assembly line, as someone described it. And Prime Minister, I just wonder, you mentioned that you are spending $100 million in Andros. Why don't you spend some money in a youth development program? Don't you think the country needs to have a heavy investment in youth development programs?
Yes.
You're putting money in courts.
Yes.
Why not in a youth development program?
Let's put it this way. We have a commitment for a restorative program for young people. The Andros, though, don't mix it up for me. Andros is going to lay the basis for earning the revenue to pay for a youth program. A youth program is very, very costly, and yes, it is necessary. We've determined that. And yes, I have asked the Ministry of Finance to find me the revenue to begin that program. So this is nothing that we're postponing. That is something that we're currently looking at. But with respect to causing there to be development, we need to have an economy that enables us to do the things you're talking about.
Fine, but
all right?
let's zero in on the
no, but
problems
Mr.
of
Jones,
the
the first thing you have to do is that as you look to the holistic long-term approach, being able to grab young people, give them wholesome activities, propagandize them in terms of what's right, what's wrong, how to be good citizens of the country. As you're doing that, you have to deal with those that exist. And those that exist are those who are before the criminal courts, and you have to be able to try them. You just cannot have them walking around untried. So therefore, we have to create the courts. This is the only way we can do it. We have to create the new judges. We have to put them in place, and we have to have that. Whilst we are doing that, we're dealing with what you're recommending. what you're suggesting, this restorative program of young people, because we know, for example, that it is necessary, but it is a very costly affair. And yes, we know the answer. Do you lose more by not doing it as opposed to by spending now, even if you have to borrow to do it?
Doesn't the government recognize that we have an ill-disciplined society, especially with young people, Prime Minister, and there are some challenges that we have because of the miseducation of people, or undereducated people, or poorly educated young people, any one of those you want to use as a description. And all of this is manifested in a lack of discipline in the society and the social decay that we have.
You've described it accurately. The question is, what is the formula that we must use to fix it? We know we have a captive population in the school. So we know, therefore, that the school must have programs that address that. Within the schools itself, for example, there are varying degrees of attention deficit disorders going on in the schools that schools must diagnose, because these are people who are vulnerable to be exploited and to be turned to a life of crime because of the inability to reason and reason things out. And so all of this requires us to have an aggressive involvement now in the educational system. We know that children are put out of school because they can't stay within the school confines. No one, and they're sent to urban renewal centers. We know we have to have something, some formula to deal with them. That's what we're addressing now, to deal with these children that just sit there. We know children come in to start the school and do not finish it. Rather than just ignore them and let them go out there and become a part of what's happening out there, we know we have to fix that. So the point I'm making is that moving forward, we know the problem. We see the problem. We see it manifested in the statistics on crime. We see the fear of our population. But Mr. Jones, as I thought about this, you know, and we don't do enough to bring home to Bahamian citizens the need to love the country, to know that when crime advisories are put on the country, that it is a negative impact on the country. It diminishes the economy and opportunities for Bahamians, and that we cannot afford to have, and this I'm talking now to parents, right? I'm talking to adults who know people are being protected who are involved in crime. I'm talking about not allowing this to happen, because if they're your children, they are either victims who commit the crime, or victims who receive the brunt of the crime by being killed. But you know that is happening there, and we have to appeal to the public that for this, we must, as a people, do better and do more. You know, I get tired. We meet these people who come into our country and who speak, investors and others who have residents, and they talk about how they love this country. It's so beautiful, it's so meaningful. And I'm saying, what is the formula to get the Bahamian to know and believe the same thing? Yeah. That they have a special country, and they have to protect it, and they have to be involved in protecting it. So that, I think the answer in that, we're going to put together the policies, the programs, the initiatives, the police bodies, numbers of police officers, equipment, technology, all of those things we're going to do. But at the same time, we are now designing a program, hopefully early in the new year, where we are able to be getting groups of young men and women, for that matter, who are challenged and vulnerable, and being able to place them hopefully within a program that is a major training program that will enable them to become better citizens in this country.
You've gotten some good marks for your urban renewal program, Prime Minister, but is it sufficiently resourced? Do they have the resources to really do what your urban renewal vision and idea would want them to do? And while you answer that, I'm happy that you mentioned just now that some of these criminals are actually victims of failed policies.
Yes. Urban renewal was intended by me to inform public policy, to let us know what's happening in the homes in our communities. Because it's easy for someone to be elected and be in government or be a public officer and not know. and be indifferent to what's happening there. And the only way you are able to deal and come up with the answers is to know what's happening. So we ordered a house-by-house survey of 3 constituencies with a view to trying to learn from that, where we could inform public policy. But the point is that I know, for example, that we have to be much more effective with urban renewal than we have been, because it can do so much more. When we appointed the leadership, Algernon Allen and Mother Pratt, we put in 2 people who could lead that and who were in public life and who are, so to speak, grounded in the community.
Yeah, but do they have the tools? Do they have the resources that they need?
No, they don't have all of the resources they need, and they agitate for it. And it's always work in progress. And so from my point of view, we have to make a decision in this coming year, for example, where we employ them more effectively. And a part of I thought, which was an innovation, when they actually had you out there in the community with them, broadcasting what was happening. You see, because the difficulty is people have to have confidence that the government is trying, that the public sector and private sector are trying to make a difference. So they could become stakeholders. And so if you are out there broadcasting, and this is what I told Mr. Allen recently, we have to go back to that, because part and parcel of the effectiveness of urban renewal is getting people to know it exists, getting people to know how deep it is, how its reach into the community, and people will suddenly becoming part of this public education program that is so necessary. So resources, resources, resources. Yes, we need resources for roads. We need resources for education, resources for the health care. People are saying we shouldn't introduce national health insurance, for example, because it's too costly with that. Well, you listen, those people don't understand if you're poor and you're black, you die if you're sick with something. And so I'm driven by the reality, okay, that there are some fundamental things we have to do in this country, and we are going to do them in this term, and the country is going to be better off, and the country will make commitments that we'll have to honor through improving the economy, improving efficiencies, developing more sources of revenue for the country, and all of those things we are looking at now with the view of trying to bring into being.
Do you have a time frame for national health insurance?
Yes.
And what do you say
January
about
2016.
2016? What about the capacity of the economy to sustain it?
We believe that there will be the capacity. We know what we spend now in terms of contributions, over $100 million, the government's contribution into unions and their health care provisions and whatnot. We have a program that's in 3 phases: the vital phase, the core phase, and the expanded phase. The vital stage, the first phase, is about $360 million. Ultimately, in terms of the draw out of it, is about $633 million for all of it. We believe that we're in the first phase that we're going to put out. The question really for us is whether we have a single payer or multi-payer system. The insurance companies want multi-payer. It might be easier for the country if we have a single payer system, but the point is we are wrestling with all of the issues involved in it. We're going to make it happen, just like we're going to have the University of the Bahamas in 2016. We're going to, in 2015, I beg your pardon, we're going to have in January 2016 National Health Insurance first phase, which will be a major breakthrough for the country. At the same time, we have to improve the physical premises for the hospital to be able to let people know that they are now insured in the National Health Insurance Scheme.
I have 3 or 4 more questions for you. And Prime Minister, I want to talk a little bit about the performance of the public service. Whether the public service is up to scratch to deal with all of these issues that you are talking about. You have an ambitious program for the next 2-3 years. Do you have a public service that is well-resourced? Do you have a public service that has bought in to what the government is about?
Well, let me start with that question, whether the public service is bought in. I'm hoping that the public service will come to understand, at least those who think, that the way in which my government, or the direction that we're carrying the country, is the right direction, and that the outcomes that we expect are the right outcomes for the country. As to whether or not there is the capacity, it's always work in progress. Just yesterday, in a national health insurance presentation, I advocated to the group, the task force presenting to me, that behind each of them ought to be a young, qualified Bahamian who will be sitting at their feet, so to speak. And when the department starts, or the national insurance carries it now, national health insurance is introduced, we have these people who would have been benefited as young trainees in the system, because governments must constantly work towards integrating into the public service the right qualified people and giving them an opportunity to be exposed and not jealously guard this power and arrogate it unto ourselves. So that openness is necessary. With respect to training, I remember in the old days, the government used to send people up to Manchester University, Birmingham University, where I was at, training, a lot of people going for public administration. We started our own training here, but quite clearly, we need to have almost a department of the College of the Bahamas now focus on that. And we're having talks with the Minister for Public Service. The Public Service Commission has asked the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation to send in people to do a review of the public service, to make these assessments that led to your question, and so that we can actually put the country on the right path. The fact that we are engaged in a commitment for the national plan and involving the University of the Bahamas, or the College of the Bahamas now as it is called, is to ensure that the country is headed in a direction where questions that you ask on talk shows, questions that you ask here, that represent challenges to our country's development, are all part of the academic environment. And we have professors who are going to be looking at, from a pragmatic point of view, the issues and challenges of the country, keeping governments accountable for what they have to do, keeping society sensitized to what they have to do, writing books on what they have to do. So these questions are now, we will have experts coming out of the University of the Bahamas, out of that. This is some of what makes me excited, that I'm taking the country in that direction, where defining moments will come about, where we reach this plateau of development. I'm really excited about that when we look back at this period, Mr. Jones, I feel very excited that right across the board, we are going to be able to show that we looked at the natural assets of a country, where there's salt, where there's aragonite, where there's rock, and that we've transformed the way in which we get value for it, that we will look at our human resources and see the National Training Agency, and that we've actually created a training agency that is pointed at a needs assessment in the country and addressing the needs assessment in the country, that we have a health system that produces, an educational system that produces, and that we will be the best little country in the world because our economic policies are progressive and transformative.
No one doubts that you are about to transform, or about transforming the Bahamas, and that you have a tremendous vision for our country. The question is whether or not your colleagues in cabinet are as adept as you are in these issues and understand where you're going. And Prime Minister, the question is, you just lost a Minister of Financial Services. Are you
Minister of Financial Services.
Yes. Are you going to shuffle your cabinet? There are people who believe that you don't shuffle cabinets. You just leave people in place for 5 years.
No, but I've come to learn in a government and a small society that that when you have a minister who educated himself, and there's such a great necessity for personal interventions by ministers, that I say, listen, why should I, just to please the political establishment or those who are outside there, let me look at this fella to see if he's working effectively. Let him use this for these 3 or 4 years. Now, I have to make some adjustments in the absence of Ryan Pinder. I'm going to obviously have someone take that place, because I'm committed to a Ministry of Financial Services. That's a year-ending decision.
This is the end of the year now, Prime Minister?
That's my point. I know it's the end of the year, so it's a year-ending decision in terms of his replacement and the movements that will take place. I'm going to appoint some Queen's counsels. I know that there's some lawyers who will be intrigued and by that, enthralled, some of them, as a result of it, because I hopefully am going to do a good job in being able to put some non-traditional choices in there as Queen's counsel. And I'm going to do some interesting things as we move into the new year that I think will impact the country positively.
You believe 2015 then will be a fantastic year, eh?
I think it's going to be a great year. And I think it's going to lay the basis for a great period forward for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Well, Prime Minister, I'd like to thank you so very much for being here today. Of course, there are many other questions that we have, but your questions, your answers to our questions have been so informative. I decided just to allow you to have the opportunity to explain these various initiatives in a very
Thank you very much, Mr.
elongated way.
Jones. And as I was talking, I was looking back at the time when you walked into my office to form a company to start this enterprise.
Yes,
and so
you were the lawyer.
I was the lawyer, and I look back and I congratulate you for all that you have done. I encourage you to do more. The government needs to be supportive of you because it's a voice out there that we respect, that is independent, and I want to be able to say it. And I look forward to listening and watching your development, and I wish you the very best and prosperity in the new year.
Thank you so very much, Prime Minister. And I wish for you a very healthy, happy, and productive new year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching and listening to our program today. Happy New Year again.